Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we celebrate the power of kindness, resilience, and the unexpected connections that shape our lives. Today, we bring you an incredible story about Emily, a woman whose simple act of compassion led to a gift that not only transformed her life, but inspired a ripple of goodness throughout her community. It was one of those dreary autumn afternoons in a small Illinois town where the clouds hung low, and a steady drizzle painted the streets in hues of gray. Emily Parker, a woman in her late 20s, hurried down the rain-soaked road in her aging sedan. She was running late for her second job at the grocery store, her mind occupied with the relentless tide of bills piling up at home. The worn-down engine of her car hummed softly, a constant companion in her daily struggles. Emily had always been resilient. Balancing two jobs and maintaining her modest apartment in Springfield wasn't easy. But she managed, refusing to let her challenges define her. She had little time for herself, yet she carried a quiet determination to make life work. However imperfectly, on that particular day, though, fate seemed to have something different in store. As she rounded a corner, her gaze fell on a figure by the curb. A man in a wheelchair sat motionless, his hands gripping the wheels as rain streamed down his face. His frustration was evident as he struggled to navigate the uneven sidewalk. Emily's initial instinct was to drive on. She was already late, and her supervisor wasn't known for his patience. But something in her heart made her stop. Perhaps it was the loneliness etched on the man's face or the faint flicker of hope in his eyes as he glanced toward the passing cars. Pulling over, she rolled down her window. "Do you need help?" she called out, her voice warm yet uncertain. The man looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to notice him. He hesitated, his pride wrestling with his need for assistance. I don't want to trouble you," he finally said, his voice tinged with both relief and reluctance. "It's no trouble at all," Emily assured him with a gentle smile. "Where are you heading?" "Just to Chicago Memorial Hospital," he replied softly, casting his gaze downward. Emily stepped out of the car and approached him, unfazed by the rain that began to soak through her coat. She helped him into the passenger seat with careful movements, folding his wheelchair and placing it in the back. They sat in silence for a moment before she started the engine and merged back onto the road. The man introduced himself as Jack Carter, his voice subdued. He seemed hesitant to reveal much about himself, and Emily didn't press him. Instead, she focused on driving through the drizzle, the windshield wipers creating a rhythmic cadence. As they neared the hospital, Jack finally broke the silence. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't have to stop." Emily glanced at him briefly before returning her eyes to the road. "Sometimes, we all need a little help," she replied simply. When they arrived at the hospital, Emily helped Jack out of the car and unfolded his wheelchair. As he wheeled himself toward the entrance, he turned back and gave her a small, sincere smile. "Take care, Emily," he said, his words carrying an unexpected warmth. Driving away, Emily felt an unusual lightness in her chest. She had done something small, yet it seemed significant in a way she couldn't quite explain. Her days were often a blur of responsibilities, leaving little room for moments like this. That evening, as she worked her shift at the grocery store, the memory of Jack's smile lingered, a quiet reminder of the connection they had shared, however brief. The next morning brought a new day, but the same routine. Emily brewed a cup of coffee in her tiny kitchen, savoring the few quiet moments before another long day began. Her mind wandered back to Jack, curious about his life and the circumstances that had led him to that rainy street corner. She shook her head, dismissing the thoughts. She had her own struggles to manage. Just as she was about to leave for her morning shift at the diner, there was a knock at her door. It was sharp and deliberate, the kind of knock that made her heart skip. Opening the door, she was met by a man in a crisp suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Are you Emily Parker?" he asked politely, his tone professional yet kind. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" "My name is Richard Blake. I'm an attorney," he explained. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Jack Carter." Emily's breath caught. "Jack? Is everything okay?" Richard gave her a reassuring smile. "Everything is fine. Ms. Parker, Mr. Carter asked me to deliver something to you. May I come in?" She stepped aside, letting him in her modest living room. Richard placed his briefcase on the small coffee table and opened it, producing a sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said, handing it to her. "Mr. Carter asked that you read it now." With trembling hands, Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check that made her gasp. The letter was brief but heartfelt, expressing Jack's gratitude for her kindness and explaining how deeply her gesture had touched him. He had no family, the letter revealed, and her small act of humanity had reminded him that goodness still existed in the world. Emily's hands shook as she held the check. It was far more money than she had ever seen at once, a gift that could change her life in ways she hadn't imagined. Yet, as the weight of Jack's generosity sank in, she felt an overwhelming mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Why would he do this for me?" she asked softly, more to herself than to Richard. "Mr. Carter believes you deserve it," Richard replied gently. He wanted to give back to someone who showed him kindness when he needed it most. As Richard left, Emily sat in stunned silence. The check lay on the table, a symbol of Jack's trust and faith in her. What had started as a simple act of kindness had become a moment that would alter the course of her life forever. Emily sat at her small kitchen table, the check lying in front of her like a puzzle she couldn't solve. The sum written on it seemed surreal, almost absurd in its magnitude. It was enough to pay off her overdue rent, fix her car, and even allow her to cut back on her grueling work hours. But accepting it felt like an impossible task. She wasn't the kind of person who took handouts, even if they came wrapped in gratitude. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind. "Mr. Carter believes you deserve it." But why? She had merely given him a ride, a simple act of decency. Was that all it took to merit such a gesture? The thought both humbled and unsettled her. Emily prided herself on her independence, on surviving life's challenges through her own determination. This felt like cheating, like a shortcut she hadn't earned. She glanced at the letter again, rereading Jack's words. "Your kindness reminded me that good people still exist. Please use this as you see fit. It's my way of thanking you for being that light on a dark day." Light. The word stayed with her. She had never considered herself a source of light for anyone. Her days were spent in monotony, juggling 2 jobs to keep her life afloat. She wasn't a beacon of inspiration. She was just trying to survive. Yet somehow, in a fleeting moment, she had been exactly what Jack needed. That night, sleep evaded her. She tossed and turned, her mind a carousel of emotions: gratitude, guilt, confusion, and an odd sense of responsibility. By morning, she knew she couldn't make sense of this alone. She picked up the phone and dialed Richard Blake's number. "Mr. Blake," she began hesitantly when he answered. "This is Emily Parker. I've been thinking about the gift from Jack, and I don't know if I can accept it. It feels overwhelming." Richard's voice was calm and understanding. "I understand your hesitation, Ms. Parker, but let me assure you, Mr. Carter was very clear in his wishes. He believes this gift is not just about the money, but about recognizing the goodness in people. It's his way of paying it forward." "But why me?" Emily asked, her voice faltering. "I didn't do anything special. I just gave him a ride." "To you, it may seem like a small gesture," Richard replied, "but to Jack, it was much more. People often overlook him, see him as just a man in a wheelchair. Your kindness was different. You saw him as a person in need and helped without hesitation. That meant the world to him." Emily fell silent, absorbing his words. She realized that perhaps this wasn't just about the money. It was about something deeper, a connection that went beyond material value. I think I need to talk to him," she said finally. "I need to understand why he chose me." Richard paused before replying. "I can arrange that. Jack would be happy to see you." The following week, Emily found herself driving to Chicago Memorial Hospital, her stomach a knot of nerves. She had spent the past few days replaying her brief encounter with Jack, trying to grasp what he had seen in her. Now, as she approached his room, her hands trembled slightly. She knocked softly on the door, and a faint voice called out, "Come in, Pushing it open, she stepped inside. Jack sat propped up in bed, his complexion pale, but his eyes warm. He smiled when he saw her. "Emily," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "Thank you for coming." Emily managed a nervous smile as she walked closer. "I wasn't sure if I should. I needed to understand why you did this." Jack nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "I can imagine it must feel strange. But let me explain. For years, I've felt invisible, just another face in the crowd. Someone people glance at and forget. That day, when you stopped to help me, it was the first time in a long time that I felt truly seen. You didn't hesitate, didn't look at me with pity. You just helped, and that meant more to me than I can put into words." Emily's chest tightened. She had never considered how isolating Jack's life might be, how much her small act had resonated. "But I didn't do anything extraordinary," she murmured. "I just did what anyone should do." Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not everyone would have. You did, and it reminded me of the person I used to be, the person who believed in kindness, in paying it forward. This gift is my way of thanking you, and of passing that belief on." Emily's eyes stung with unshed tears. She had walked into the room seeking answers, and Jack's words gave her more than she had expected. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the impact of small, genuine moments of connection. "I don't know if I deserve this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I'll accept it, if only to honor what it means to you." Jack's smile widened, his gratitude shining through. "That's all I could ask for." As Emily left the hospital, her heart felt lighter. The weight of the decision had shifted, no longer about whether she was worthy, but about carrying forward the lesson Jack had taught her. Kindness, no matter how small, could create ripples far beyond what anyone could imagine. The weeks that followed Emily's meeting with Jack were a whirlwind of change. She decided to accept his gift, not out of self-interest, but as a way to honor the kindness and trust he had shown her. With the money, she paid off her overdue rent, repaired her aging car, and set aside enough to ease the constant pressure of juggling 2 jobs. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of financial stress begin to lift. But something deeper had shifted within her. Jack's words about kindness and being seen echoed in her heart, sparking a sense of responsibility she hadn't anticipated. She couldn't just use the money and move on. She had to do something more, something that would carry forward the spirit of Jack's generosity. Emily began volunteering at a local community center in her spare time, a modest but lively place that provided meals, job resources, and companionship for those in need. At first, it was just a few hours a week, but as the days passed, Emily found herself drawn to the work, listening to people's stories, helping them with small tasks, and simply being a source of encouragement filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. One particularly rainy afternoon, Emily met an elderly woman named Mrs. Green at the center, frail and soft-spoken. Mrs. Green was trying to carry a box of donated food to her car when Emily offered to help. As they walked together, Mrs. Green shared snippets of her life, a widow struggling to make ends meet, often feeling forgotten in a city that moved too fast. Emily listened intently, realizing how much the woman's words mirrored Jack's feelings of invisibility. When they reached the car, Mrs. Green placed a hand on Emily's arm. "You've got a kind heart, my dear," she said with a smile. "The world needs more people like you." Emily felt a lump in her throat. It was a simple moment, but it reaffirmed her belief in the ripple effects of kindness. She thought of Jack, sitting in his hospital room, and wondered if he had ever imagined how far his gesture would go. As Emily continued to spend time at the center, she began to use a portion of Jack's gift to support its programs. She quietly funded repairs for the building's leaky roof and purchased new supplies for the after-school tutoring program. Each contribution felt like a way to give back, to multiply the kindness that had been shown to her. One day, as Emily sorted through donations, she received a call from Richard Blake. "Emily," he began, his tone warm, "I have some news. Jack has passed away." Emily froze, her heart sinking. "When?" she whispered. "A few days ago." Richard replied gently. It was peaceful. He spoke of you often in his final days. He was proud of how you've carried forward the spirit of his gift. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she thanked Richard and ended the call. She sat in silence, processing the loss of a man she had only just begun to know, yet whose impact on her life was profound. Jack's generosity had not only eased her financial burdens, but had also rekindled her belief in the goodness of humanity. Determined to honor his memory, Emily began organizing a new initiative at the community center, a program called the Ripple Effect. It aimed to inspire acts of kindness by encouraging people to share their stories and pay it forward. She spoke with local businesses and residents, gathering support and spreading the word. Slowly but surely, the program gained momentum, becoming a beacon of hope in the neighborhood. Months later, Emily stood in front of a room full of people at the center's first Ripple Effect event. Faces young and old watched her with anticipation as she stepped up to the podium. "Kindness is a gift that doesn't stop giving," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "A stranger's kindness changed my life in ways I never imagined. It reminded me that even the smallest act of compassion can make a difference. Today, we're here to celebrate those moments and to encourage each other to keep the ripple going." She shared Jack's story, not in full detail, but enough to illustrate the power of connection and generosity. By the end of her speech, the room was filled with applause, and several attendees stepped forward to share their own experiences of giving and receiving kindness. As the event wound down, Emily felt a sense of fulfillment she couldn't quite put into words. She looked around the room, at the laughter and camaraderie, and thought of Jack. His faith in her had created something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Later that evening, as she sat on the porch of her small apartment, Emily gazed at the stars and felt a quiet peace. Jack's legacy wasn't just the money he had given her. It was the belief that kindness could transform lives. And now, she knew with certainty that she would spend the rest of her life ensuring that his gift and his memory continued to shine. Emily smiled to herself, whispering a silent thank you to Jack. In the stillness of the night, she felt the ripples of his kindness all around her, carrying her forward into a brighter, more compassionate future. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey with Emily. Her story reminds us all that kindness, no matter how small, can create waves of change far beyond what we imagine. If you found this story inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more uplifting tales. Your support helps us continue spreading messages of hope and compassion. Until next time, remember to be the light in someone else's life.